There's a neat little micro-genre that seems to have formed in the Western indie scene, which as far as I can tell started with Gunpoint. 2D side-scrolling stealthy puzzle action games often featuring leaping as a primary mechanic. An interesting exception to that last bit is Deadbolt, a 2D side-scrolling stealthy puzzle action game which doesn't feature leaping as a primary mechanic, which is another very cool game that I'll probably make a video on at some point, but for now I'd like to talk about Ronin, a 2D side-scrolling stealthy puzzle action game which does feature leaping as a primary mechanic. Ronin's particular spin on this very engaging formula is that it leans harder on the action side of things and less on the stealth, and that it's a turn-based game. To be clear, it doesn't feature any of the standard features of turn-based games like abstraction so heavy that it barely resembles combat, or grid-based movement to ensure that a move is always completed before the turn ends. You can move, jump, and attack freely, and when you first start each level it will be running in real time, but once an engagement has occurred, the action will periodically freeze, giving you as much time as you need to decide on and execute the perfect sequence of jumps, grappling hook swings, attacks, and dodges to slash your way through multiple armed guards with nothing but a katana and inhuman agility and reflexes. Each time you execute a movement, game logic will resume for a few seconds before freezing again. If you're in midair when this happens, you can take action before landing, which allows for very precise and clever maneuvers using the grappling hook to create very specific swing arcs which would be difficult if not impossible to pull off in fully real-time gameplay. It also allows for situations where a smart and observant player can avoid bullets from multiple attacks for impressively long amounts of time, which would, again, be unreasonable to expect in a pure action game where such a feat would be more taxing on one's reaction time. The upshot of all this in terms of overall gameplay experience is that it's probably the most enjoyable and well-realized execution on the cyberpunk street samurai archetype I've ever seen in a game. The mechanical systems are set up in such a way as to allow the player to organically pull off the fantasy of being an obscenely agile and skillful warrior in actual gameplay. There are plenty of games that can use heavy scripting to pull off similar moments, but this is one of the few where it can be reasonably achieved simply through player agency and mastery of the mechanics, and it's incredibly satisfying to live out the fantasy of, say, leaping down a hallway from ceiling to floor and back again, making your way toward the armed guard at the end of it, who only manages to repeatedly shoot the spot where you just were, always barely missing. On the other hand, the amount of options at your disposal in any given encounter and the amount of precision afforded by the turn-based mechanics allows the developers to throw you up against some absolutely brutal odds in the later levels without it ever feeling unfair. The game gets hard as balls towards the end, but your character is so overpowered compared to any individual enemy combatant that 1 versus 10 feels like an absolutely even fight. Your character has essentially non-existent durability. A single hit is enough to down you, and the entire game is built around giving you the tools to avoid that one hit, even if there are several bullets whizzing directly past your head in the process. By the time you're finished, you will need to have utterly mastered the art of sailing through a hail of bullets without getting hit, and as a result, the early level's elation of effortlessly cutting through patrols gives way to a deep and satisfying game of tactics that feels all the more gratifying when you finally manage to pull off that perfect run and destroy an army of foes without so much as a scratch. Ronin seems to have mostly flown under the radar, which, while perhaps fitting, is not at all just. It's a fairly simple game, but has constructed an extremely engaging set of mechanics with more than its fair share of style and flair, and I really think you should check it out if you're at all interested by what I've described here.